If there is one subject I keep returning to after all these years of studying and discussing avoidant attachment, it is this one. I have spent countless hours explaining why avoidants pull away, what their silence often represents, and how someone can recover after experiencing the emotional confusion they leave behind. Those discussions remain important, and they always will. Yet the question people ask with the greatest urgency is something much deeper. They want to know whether the avoidant truly formed an emotional bond. They wonder if the relationship carried genuine attachment, or if it only felt meaningful because they invested so much of themselves. Again and again, I meet people who are not only mourning the end of the relationship, they are trapped by uncertainty. They remember moments that felt deeply authentic, moments they believed would define their emotional lives. Then came the distance, the emotional shutdown, and the silence. Suddenly, everything that once felt undeniable seemed to be replaced by behavior suggesting the relationship meant very little. That painful contradiction leaves people questioning both their memories and their instincts, unable to decide whether the connection they experienced was ever truly real. Today I want to address that uncertainty with something more valuable than simple reassurance. Comfort alone may ease the pain for a moment, but lasting peace comes from understanding what is actually happening beneath the surface. The reality is that avoidant attachment rarely looks like secure attachment, especially when genuine bonding begins to develop. Many people spend years searching for evidence of love while overlooking the signs that matter because they are using the wrong expectations. Before we explore the specific words, an avoidant may say after forming a real emotional attachment, it is important to understand what bonding actually feels like inside their psychological world. Without that foundation, those words and behaviors can easily be misunderstood. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, emotional bonding is not experienced as a calm, welcoming process. It often feels overwhelming, disruptive, and deeply unsettling because it challenges the very defenses they have relied on for years to feel emotionally safe. Those emotional defenses did not appear by accident. They were built slowly through painful experiences, reinforced over time, and protected with extraordinary care. At a level that often exists outside conscious awareness, the avoidant mind believes those walls are necessary for survival. Allowing someone to get close is not simply uncomfortable, it can feel dangerous because closeness awakens memories of emotional pain that once felt impossible to escape. While a securely attached person often experiences intimacy as something that naturally grows through trust and consistency, the avoidant nervous system interprets that same closeness as a threat to its carefully maintained sense of control. That is why genuine attachment is so significant when it happens. It requires the avoidant to move against deeply rooted protective instincts that have shaped their emotional life for years. Once you understand that reality, you begin to recognize that many behaviors which appear confusing, inconsistent, or distant may actually reveal an internal struggle between self-protection and a bond that has become much deeper than they know how to manage. When an avoidant forms a genuine emotional bond despite every defense they have built over the years, something remarkable takes place inside them. It is not an ordinary experience, nor is it something that happens often. Reaching the part of them hidden beneath years of emotional protection is one of the most meaningful psychological shifts they can experience. Yet it rarely feels exciting or romantic from their perspective. Instead, it can feel unsettling, almost as though their carefully guarded inner world has been unexpectedly altered. They may wake up realizing someone has become emotionally important in ways they never intended or consciously allowed. That realization often creates discomfort because it challenges everything their protective system was designed to prevent. As a result, their feelings rarely appear through dramatic declarations of love. Instead, they emerge through subtle words and behaviors that seem confusing unless you understand the unique way avoidants express genuine attachment. One of the earliest verbal signs that an avoidant has already developed a real bond often sounds like quiet self-criticism rather than affection. They may casually say things like, "I'm not very good at relationships," "I've always handled life better on my own," or "I'm probably going to mess this up." These statements are usually woven into ordinary conversations without drawing attention to themselves. They do not emphasize their importance because openly admitting vulnerability feels far too risky. Beneath those simple words is something much more significant. They are allowing you to glimpse an insecurity they usually keep hidden from everyone else. Rather than presenting themselves as confident or emotionally distant, they briefly expose a fear they normally protect at all costs. Even though they leave themselves room to deny the seriousness of what they shared, those quiet admissions often reflect a level of trust that only appears after meaningful emotional attachment has already begun. The real meaning of those moments becomes clear, not only through what they say, but through what happens immediately afterward. Once they reveal that hidden insecurity, there is often a subtle pause. It may last only a few seconds, but internally, they are carefully observing how you respond. Their nervous system is silently asking whether their honesty will be accepted with kindness or met with criticism, pressure, or rejection. If you respond with patience instead of trying to analyze them, fix them, or demand even greater openness, something powerful happens inside their emotional world. They begin to experience vulnerability without the painful consequences they have always expected. They learn that exposing a genuine fear does not automatically lead to abandonment or losing themselves inside another person. That quiet realization strengthens the emotional bond in ways that neither of you may openly discuss, yet it becomes one of the strongest foundations of trust they are capable of building. Another powerful indication that an avoidant has formed a genuine attachment appears through something I think of as selective emotional memory. During an ordinary conversation, you might casually mention a personal story, a passing thought, or a small detail that seemed completely forgettable at the time. Weeks or even months later, they unexpectedly bring it up with surprising accuracy. They remember your exact words, the situation, or a tiny detail you assumed had disappeared long ago. To most people, this may seem like simple memory, but with an avoidant, it often reveals something much deeper. They were not simply listening in that moment. They quietly carried that memory with them. They revisited it privately, reflected on it, and gave it emotional significance without ever telling you they had done so. Their attachment often grows in silence long before their actions openly reveal how deeply you have become part of their inner world. This is one of the clearest yet most misunderstood signs that an avoidant has developed a genuine emotional attachment. They do not mentally hold on to everyone they meet. In most relationships, they know how to stay involved just enough to keep things functioning while remaining emotionally distant enough to protect themselves. Their attention is carefully managed, and they rarely carry personal details beyond the conversation itself. That changes only when someone becomes deeply important to them. Suddenly, they remember something you mentioned weeks or even months ago with remarkable accuracy. It may be a passing comment, a childhood story, or a dream you casually shared. While you may have forgotten saying it, they quietly kept it with them. That involuntary memory is not simply a sign of being attentive. It reveals that your thoughts and experiences have become meaningful enough to occupy space in their private emotional world long after the conversation has ended. When an avoidant unexpectedly recalls those small details, you are witnessing evidence of an emotional connection that continues behind the scenes, even if their outward behavior sometimes appears distant. During the moments you are apart, your words often return to them without invitation. They revisit conversations, replay memories, and quietly reflect on things they would never admit occupy so much of their attention. This happens because your presence has become woven into the way they organize their inner life, often without them realizing how deeply it has happened. Another powerful sign appears through what seems like an ordinary comment about the future. They might mention visiting a place together someday, sharing an experience later on, or casually including you in a future plan. These statements may seem insignificant, but for someone with an avoidant attachment style, they carry enormous psychological meaning because imagining someone beside them in the future is something they rarely allow themselves to do. For securely attached individuals, talking about future experiences together often happens naturally. It is simply part of growing closer to someone. Avoidants experience this very differently. Their emotional defenses are built to preserve independence and protect the future from becoming emotionally dependent on another person. When they begin picturing you as part of their life ahead, even in subtle or indirect ways, it shows that those protective barriers have started to shift. Without realizing it, they are making room for you inside a space they once believed belonged only to themselves. They may never openly say, "I see you in my future," because those words feel overwhelmingly vulnerable. Instead, they express it through casual comments that quietly reveal you have already become part of the life they imagine moving toward. Those seemingly ordinary remarks often communicate far more than dramatic declarations ever could. Perhaps the most meaningful sign of all is what I call a personal territory disclosure. This happens when an avoidant shares something they have never revealed to anyone else. It is not always a dramatic confession or a life-changing secret. Sometimes it is a forgotten childhood memory, an insecurity they have quietly carried for years, or a deeply personal belief they rarely trust others to understand. These pieces of themselves exist behind emotional walls that have protected them for a very long time. Even while sharing, they often minimize the importance of what they are revealing so they can retreat emotionally if they feel misunderstood. But make no mistake, the act itself requires tremendous courage. What matters is not only the information they share, but the trust required to let someone enter that protected space. When an avoidant allows you access to that hidden part of their inner world, it often represents one of the strongest indications that a deep and lasting emotional bond has already been formed. And the fifth sign they express after truly bonding is perhaps the most surprising and unexpected of them all. The fifth sign is probably the hardest to understand because it can feel painfully contradictory, especially if you have been deeply hurt by an avoidance behavior. I want you to approach this carefully because it requires nuance rather than quick conclusions. Sometimes the strongest evidence of a genuine bond appears through the very act of pushing someone away. I am not talking about the ordinary emotional distance that many avoidants naturally maintain. This is something much more intense. It is the kind of withdrawal that happens after the emotional connection has become so meaningful that their nervous system begins to experience it as overwhelming. Instead of creating space out of habit, they retreat because the attachment itself has crossed an emotional threshold they no longer know how to manage. Their defenses become fully activated, not because the bond is weak, but because it has become stronger than the protective system feels capable of handling. When this type of withdrawal happens, listen carefully to the language they use. It often becomes unusually personal. They might say things like, "You make me feel too much," "I don't know how to handle this with you," or "Being close to you feels overwhelming." Notice the difference. They are not speaking about relationships in general or intimacy as an abstract idea. They are speaking about you specifically. Someone who has not formed a meaningful attachment usually creates distance without needing to explain it in personal terms. But when an avoidant has genuinely bonded, they often cannot separate the emotional intensity from the individual who awakened it. Their struggle is no longer simply with closeness itself. It is with the reality of what your presence has awakened inside them. As painful as those words may be to hear, they often reveal that the emotional connection has reached a level powerful enough to shake the very foundations of the self-protective identity they have depended on for years. There is another sign that deserves attention because it shows itself more through actions than words. It is the quiet instinct to protect you, even when you never asked for help. Once an avoidant develops a genuine emotional bond, their behavior often changes in subtle but meaningful ways. They begin noticing your routines, remembering your preferences, anticipating your needs, and looking for practical ways to make your life a little easier. These gestures are rarely dramatic. They might remind you of something important, solve a problem before you notice it, or quietly step in when they realize you need support. What makes these actions so significant is that they reflect careful observation and emotional investment. They have been paying attention to your life in ways that only happen when someone has become deeply important to them. even if they never openly admit the depth of those feelings. Interestingly, after doing something thoughtful, they often try to erase its emotional importance with casual language. They may shrug it off by saying it was nothing, insist that anyone would have done the same thing, or quickly change the subject before you have a chance to appreciate the gesture. That habit of minimizing is incredibly revealing. Someone who feels emotionally detached has no reason to downplay their actions because there is nothing emotionally significant to hide. But an avoidant who has formed a deep attachment often wants to express care while keeping that care emotionally deniable. They offer genuine protection, then immediately wrap it in ordinary words so the vulnerability remains hidden. Rather than focusing only on what they say afterward, pay attention to what they actually did. Their actions often communicate feelings they cannot comfortably express. In many cases, those quiet, thoughtful acts become the most honest expression of love they are capable of giving at that stage of their emotional journey. Very often, an avoidant's words are designed to reduce the emotional weight of what they are feeling, while their actions quietly reveal what is actually happening inside. Their explanations protect them, but their behavior tells the real story. Before we finish, I want to address something that is just as important as every sign we have discussed. There is a danger that comes with understanding these signals. After hearing about the remembered details, the future plans, the private disclosures, the protective actions, and even the painful push away, it is easy to take this knowledge and turn it into a reason to keep holding on to someone who is still unable to give you the relationship you need. I understand why that happens. When you have lived with uncertainty for so long, finally receiving evidence that the connection was genuine can feel like finding hope after years of emotional confusion. It is natural to want that hope to become proof that everything will eventually work out. But there is an important difference between confirming the existence of a bond and predicting the future of a relationship. The signs we explored tell you that your connection was meaningful. They suggest that you reached a level of emotional closeness that an avoidant rarely allows another person to reach. The quiet moments of vulnerability, the careful attention to your life, the memories they carried, the instinct to protect you, and the future they briefly imagined with you all point towards something authentic. Those experiences were not illusions created by your imagination. They reflected a genuine emotional attachment. However, recognizing that truth does not automatically mean they possessed the emotional capacity to maintain the kind of healthy, dependable relationship you deserved. Forming a bond and consistently showing up for that bond are two entirely different challenges, and one does not always guarantee the other. An avoidant can sincerely love someone while still operating from unresolved emotional patterns that prevent them from expressing that love in stable, reliable ways. Their feelings may be completely genuine, yet their nervous system may still react to closeness by withdrawing, shutting down, or creating distance whenever intimacy becomes overwhelming. This creates one of the most painful realities in relationships with avoidance. The connection can be real. The love can be real. At the same time, the inconsistency, the emotional absence, and the inability to sustain the relationship can also be completely real. Those truths are not mutually exclusive. Accepting all of them at once is difficult, but it is also one of the healthiest perspectives you can develop. It allows you to honor what you experienced without convincing yourself that love alone was enough to overcome emotional patterns that had not yet been healed. As we close, I want to leave you with one thought that may change the way you look back on your entire experience. Discovering that an avoidant genuinely bonded with you does not lower the standards you should have for a relationship. It does not erase their responsibility to show up consistently, nor does it mean you should wait indefinitely for them to become emotionally available. What it changes is the story you tell yourself. It reminds you that your intuition was not misleading you. The emotional depth you sensed was real. The connection you believed existed was not something you invented out of wishful thinking. You were not loving someone who felt nothing. You were loving someone who felt deeply but lacked the ability to remain present inside those emotions. That distinction matters because it protects you from blaming your own capacity to love. Your ability to recognize genuine emotional depth is not a weakness. It is one of your greatest strengths. And whether that avoidant ever fully confronts the bond they formed with you or continues carrying it silently behind their defenses, one truth remains unchanged. They knew the connection was real, and deep down, so did you. If there is one message I hope stays with you after watching this, it is this. Understanding how an avoidant bonds is not meant to keep you emotionally attached to someone who cannot meet you where you are. It is meant to give you clarity. Clarity is one of the greatest gifts you can receive after an emotionally confusing relationship, because confusion has a way of making you question everything. It makes you question your memories, your instincts, your ability to judge character, and even your own heart. But clarity begins to restore what confusion tried to steal. It reminds you that not every relationship ends because the feelings were fake. Sometimes relationships end because one person simply did not have the emotional capacity to carry the depth of what they genuinely felt. Those are two completely different realities, and recognizing that difference can become the beginning of your healing instead of the continuation of your suffering. One of the biggest mistakes people make after loving an avoidant is believing they have to choose between two extreme stories. Either the avoidant never cared at all, or the relationship was destined to work if only they had waited longer. In reality, life is rarely that simple. Human emotions are far more complicated than that. A person can deeply love someone and still be unable to create a healthy relationship. They can genuinely miss you while continuing to avoid vulnerability. They can think about you every day while remaining emotionally unavailable. They can recognize your value without knowing how to consistently protect the relationship. Accepting these contradictions does not excuse hurtful behavior, nor does it require you to stay connected to someone who continues to wound you. It simply allows you to see the situation as it truly was, instead of forcing it into a story that leaves you either blaming yourself or completely denying what you experienced. Perhaps the greatest lesson hidden inside all of this is that love by itself is never enough. Healthy relationships require courage, emotional maturity, accountability, communication, consistency, and the willingness to remain present even when vulnerability feels uncomfortable. Without those qualities, even genuine love struggles to survive. That is why your future should never depend only on whether someone bonded with you. It should depend on whether they are willing to grow beyond the defenses that keep them from protecting the bond they created. Emotional connection is the foundation, but emotional responsibility is what keeps two people together over time. Never confuse potential with readiness. Someone may have the potential to become an incredible partner one day, but if they are not emotionally ready today, your life cannot remain paused while you wait for that possibility to become reality. As you move forward, I want you to carry something far more valuable than hope that someone else will eventually change. Carry confidence in yourself. Trust the part of you that recognized something meaningful. Trust the heart that loved honestly. Trust the intuition that sensed emotional depth even when it was hidden beneath fear and silence. None of those qualities make you weak. They make you emotionally alive. They are the same qualities that will eventually help you recognize someone who not only feels deeply, but also has the courage to express those feelings openly, consistently, and without running from them. The goal was never simply to be loved. The goal is to be loved in a way that feels emotionally safe, peaceful, and dependable. That kind of love does exist, and you never have to settle for less simply because someone cared but could not stay. If this journey has taught you anything, let it be this. Never measure your worth by another person's emotional limitations. Their inability to remain close is not a reflection of your value. Their fear of intimacy does not reduce your capacity to inspire love. Someone else's unfinished healing should never become the standard by which you judge yourself. Continue becoming the kind of person who values honesty over uncertainty, consistency over mixed signals, and emotional availability over emotional mystery. The right relationship will never require you to constantly decode silence, question your importance, or search for hidden proof that you matter. It will show you, repeatedly and willingly, through both words and actions. And finally, remember this. Whether the avoidant ever returns or never speaks to you again, whether they eventually heal or continue living behind the same emotional walls, your path does not have to remain tied to theirs. You can honor what was real without remaining trapped by what was incomplete. You can appreciate the love that existed without accepting the pain that accompanied it. Most importantly, you can walk away knowing that your heart was never foolish for loving deeply. It was simply brave enough to recognize connection where it truly existed. Now it deserves someone who not only forms that connection, but also has the emotional strength to protect it every single day. That is the kind of relationship worth waiting for. That is the kind of love that brings peace instead of confusion. And when it arrives, you will not have to wonder whether you matter. You will know, because someone emotionally healthy will make sure you never have to question it.